return home. Longevity, hopefully.
That's right. Ron, ready. Welcome to North Logan Planning Commission meeting, September 8th, 2022. We'll begin with Kenny saying our prayer and then, well, first, pledge first. Kenny's saying the pledge, Heather's saying the prayer. I'm catching my breath. Okay.
All right. Please repeat the pledge of allegiance with me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father in heaven, we are grateful to be gathered here this evening as community members and planning commission and city employees to discuss important matters for North Logan City. We pray that thou will be with us as we discuss these matters and review items of concern. And we pray for our community that there will be water and sufficient needs for those around us. May we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Kenny and Heather. We need a motion to adopt the agenda for today.
I move that we adopt the agenda.
I second.
Karen moved to adopt the agenda. Heather seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. I've been gone, Marie. I didn't see any minutes. Do we have minutes to approve?
We have a lot.
We do? Okay. No minutes we need to think about this time. Scott, you made it back? Huh.
I did.
Have any follow-up on issues from last time?
As you'll remember, last meeting, we just had a little bit of a pass off with Spencer and myself. We talked about the moderate income housing with the expectation that we would come back to this meeting with a public hearing, which is a formal process to make a recommendation on the proposed changes to the city council with the public input process. So that's what we're here today on this item for. We also have one other item on the agenda for an administrative review of a commercial subdivision, a 5-lot subdivision. But as far as follow-up from last meeting, that's what you see here today on the agenda.
Okay, thanks, Scott. We'll just move on to item number 1. Public hearing, consideration and potential recommendation regarding a city initiated proposal to amend the moderate income housing component of the city's general plan intended to meet the requirements of the Utah State House bill. I will read the instructions for public hearing, then go from there. Oh, that's right. Thank you, Marie. Scott, you present the item and then we'll go to there. People need to know what we're talking about, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Happy to give a quick overview here for the public as well. I know the Planning Commission's been looking at this and have been since 2019 when this requirement first came up, and then again this year with these modifications that are required by state code. The legislature has been looking at ways to improve access to moderate income housing. For those who are curious, moderate income housing is defined as housing that is affordable to a household that makes 80% of the county median income. So it's middle-class housing, basically, is what you could say. As everybody knows, the last couple of years, it's been more and more challenging to find this price point of housing, and anything that pops up gets snatched up immediately because there's such a large demand. So in 2019, the legislature basically said all municipalities and jurisdictions over a certain size, us included, have to have a planning element in our general plan for moderate income housing. So in 2019, that was created, that element was appended to the general plan as a formal document to guide policy decisions with regards to moderate income housing. So fast forward a couple of years to this year, 2022, the legislature came back and said, okay, good job for putting your plans together. Now we're going to get a little bit more focused in that planning effort, and we're going to require you to be a little bit more specific as to the goals and timelines in your plan. Previously in 2019, it was more aspirational in its language, saying let's try to encourage these types of goals. Let's try to find ways to facilitate. This year, as you'll see in the draft that we've come up with, there's some language in here that's a little bit more specific, and this is pulled directly from the state language. So I'm going to, just so everybody's aware, that there will be a resolution with the city council following a recommendation from the planning commission, and the resolution is, it's basically just going through and saying, this is why we're doing this action. Here's the history as to what we've done in the past. For example, we're holding the public hearing tonight, September 8th, with the planning commission to consider the amendments. And if passed by the city council, then this document would be executed and recorded. But below, you'll see.
Excuse me, Scott, can you bump the size of that up on the screen,
Yeah,
please?
absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Let's go a little bit bigger,
One more. That's more.
a little bit
better.
more legible. There you go.
Thank
So
you.
this is a resolution. This is a document, basically a cover page that explains the text amendment to follow. And so this is what will be the document that would be executed by the city council when they hear this at their next meeting, following the planning commission's recommendation. But this is kind of just a formal cover page, so to speak. Down below is where I pulled the current draft of the housing element from the general plan. The general plan is made up of multiple elements, such as land use and demographics, those types of things, transportation. This particular element is section 4 of the general plan. So what you'll see here is that chapter or section with red line changes that follow the discussion and the goals and timelines that the planning commission has worked through in the past. So skipping down this, the body of the text is unchanged, and it's getting a little bit dated because this was put together obviously with data back in 2017, and this is what was put together back in 2019, the original element that was adopted. So we're not making any changes to the body of this document. The only thing that we're required to adjust based on the most recent legislation is towards the bottom, where this element talks about goals and timelines. So I'm going to scroll through here. If anybody wants to read the body of this, they're welcome to. It's available online, and we'll be happy to get you a comment. But skipping to the meat and potatoes of the proposal, we'll hop down towards the last couple of pages here. And commissioners, I did print out these pages, so they're in front of you as a red line copy if you'd like to read that in paper format. But what this basically is doing is it's a red line draft. So everything that's crossed out is what we're proposing to strike. And everything that is not in red here is what we're proposing to add. And it's a little bit confusing. I apologize. I did this in Microsoft Word. I'm still getting used to the whole Google Cloud thing, as I've been a Microsoft user forever. But typically you'd see this in blue as a proposed addition, and then red as a strike. But when you upload it to the Google Cloud, it changes the formatting. But if it's new in red, it's proposed. If it's striked out, then it's proposed to be stricken. Okay. So what is left in black text is what was already there previously, and what we're adding in, you'll see below. So we were required by the state to have at least 3 goals. They gave us a menu of 23 potential goals to select from, a menu item, so to speak. And the goals that we had chosen are largely unchanged from what was chosen back in 2019. However, there are some minor adjustments to bring it into alignment with the state requirement. So as you'll see, we're striking out assure and we're adding facilitate. This is actually the language pulled directly from the state requirements. So before it read, rezone for densities necessary to assure the production of moderate income housing. This time they said facilitate, and I don't think that that's any more pointed, but it was a change in their language, so we needed to comply and follow that. What we're looking at in the strategies is to strike this initial strategy and then add this strategy below. So the first goal, rezoning for densities necessary to facilitate the production of moderate income housing. That allows for housing to be built at price points that are maybe a little bit more attainable. It's not guaranteed to meet that price point of moderate income, but it's much more likely to do so. So what we're striking and what we're adding is shown here. So the addition reads, evaluate applications for zoning map amendments as they are submitted and consider rezoning to higher densities while also considering the general plan and other factors. So this is more of a reactive type of a strategy. So when we do get development proposals from landowners, we can look at that and see if it's appropriate to rezone them to densities that may be a little bit higher than they are under current zoning. We also had to add a timeline. So this is what is new in this most recent legislation. So we have to be specific as to when we are going to address these strategies. So on this first goal, we want to isolate and discuss potential candidate areas during the first City Council and Planning Commission workshop in 2023. So we'll kind of look at the map and say, where would this make sense? And that will be a meeting that we hold early next year. Additionally, we'll consider a rezone of one or more of the areas discussed in the workshop by the end of 2023 calendar year. So that might be a developer comes in and talks to us and says, hey, I own one of these parcels. I'd like to discuss a rezone as your housing element would indicate. Or, the city council also has the ability to take land and rezone it to advance the purposes of the general plan if they so see fit. Okay. The second goal.
Scott, excuse me just a moment.
Go ahead.
Do you prefer to wait until you're through with your presentation before we ask questions, or do you want us to?
Not at all.
Kind
Feel free to speak up at any time.
Under evaluate applications for zoning map amendment. Will you just clarify that for me a little bit?
Yeah. A zoning map amendment is just a fancy way of saying rezone. So
Okay.
you'll notice that we have a zoning map, and that zoning map indicates what can and can't be built where in the city and at what densities and what uses can be applied on those properties. So anybody who wants to amend that map would have to request what we call a rezone, change the zoning of their property.
Thank you.
Yep.
So, Scott, a question. Are there any of these, like the Smiling H, that are going to be affected by this?
No. So this particular strategy is if a developer were to come to us after this is adopted and say, it looks like you guys have a goal as a city to potentially rezone property for densities that would facilitate moderate income housing. And we say, okay, which land are you guys talking about? And what type of zoning are you looking to apply? And that's where we would have to look at it with the Planning Commission and the City Council. Okay, any other questions on this first goal? Okay. The second goal you'll see is a little bit more edited. So previously the language read, allow for higher density or moderate income residential development in commercial or mixed use zones near major transit investment corridors, commercial centers, or employment centers. Again, we're bringing this language into alignment with the state requirement. But what was interesting here is the state wanted to strike allow for higher density and say specifically to zone or rezone property for higher density or moderate income residential development. So they're a little bit more pointed in that language. It doesn't necessarily say where or how much, but that we need to zone for these types of densities for these types of developments. Okay. This language here is actually interesting. This language was a requirement for any municipality that had fixed rail guideway. So that's a municipality that may have a track station or a front runner station. We obviously don't have that. Our transit is obviously the CBTD, a bus system. So maybe in the future, if we ever get to that point, 50 years, 100 years from now, where we actually have light rail in the valley, I don't know that we would, but I don't think that that language is actually going to affect us. But we do have commercial or mixed use zones where we could look at these rezones to allow for that density.
So Scott, you've included the language on near major transit investment corridors
Mhm.
just to align with the state
Yes,
language, even though we don't have that.
correct. We could strike that and still be in compliance with the state. It was only a requirement for a municipality that actually had that element within their jurisdiction, which we do not. So if you're more comfortable removing it, we absolutely could do so.
Well, I wonder if to avoid confusion in the future, if we should just remove that, but that would be my thought.
No, we don't have bus rapid transit either. I don't know if you guys have been to Ogden anytime recently, but they just installed a BRT is what they call it, bus rapid transit in their downtown. And it's basically just a dedicated bus lane to get people from downtown Ogden to McKay Hospital and Weber State. I don't see bus rapid transit in our future anytime soon either. So it doesn't hurt to keep it in, but it doesn't hurt to take it out. Yep. But it was there prior as far as the language that you guys worked through in the past. So I didn't want to adjust that. But if that's something you want to pull out, we can certainly make that recommendation as that language having been stricken from the proposal.
Let's just go on and then we'll talk about that.
Okay. So as far as strategies for the second goal, we're striking these first two. That talks about utilizing existing zones such as the city center adjacent, city center and commercial that allow for and encourage mixed use development in planned areas without compromising existing character of the city or disturbing existing neighborhoods. And we're leaving it as just a single strategy. So what is here is what would be left. So it would read, modify existing underutilized mixed use zones, including the city center commercial and downtown zones to allow for additional higher density residential. Now, I have to admit, I'm not sure what the discussion was on the striking of these two bullet points and then the remainder here. Maybe you guys would be able to explain that better than I, but as far as the red line that you had worked through with Spencer, that was what was remaining as this strategy to achieve this second goal. As far as timeline on that is concerned, we have indicated that we will evaluate city infrastructure and water supply in early 2023 after the new city well has been completed and determine an appropriate residential density increase factoring in water supply and increased demand. And then we'll start the process to modify city code if deemed appropriate. Any questions on that second goal?
Yeah, Scott, on goal 2, then we specifically say that we are going to zone or rezone. So we are committed under this plan to take some kind of action.
If we want to be diligent and implement this plan to its greatest extent, then yes. Now there are goals and strategies and general plans that some strategies get implemented above and beyond what the general plan calls for. And there are some strategies that cities decide are not any longer beneficial or meet the needs of the community. But we do have to have these plans, not just as aspirational, but what we intend to do is probably the best to communicate to the public who this plan serves. But there's not like a slap on the wrist if, for example, we don't achieve some of these things.
Yeah, my recollection from our workshop where we initially discussed this was we are committed. And like you said, part of that is because of the more pointed language the legislature has given us. We are committed to rezoning, but the goal is that we modify current underutilized mixed use zones. And it doesn't say how much we need to increase residential density in those zones. So we can take baby steps and still be compliant with this.
That's right. And as I've watched the legislature work the last several years on this particular topic, they're learning as they go. They see what communities are doing and they're changing things to try to address some of those things. They do want us to be successful. And like I mentioned, there's not a slap on the wrist yet if we don't achieve this, but I do believe as we have to report every year on our progress, if our reporting continues to show no progress, I believe the next, couple of legislative sessions may be more direct as to if you don't achieve the goals in your plan, then you're no longer eligible for funding. Right now, we have to have the plan, we have to have the timelines, we have to have the strategies to qualify for funding, but in the future, it may get to a point where they say, okay, if you don't make progress on your goals, then you are not eligible for that funding. That's speculative, it's just my opinion, but we'll see where that goes the next couple of years.
So I wonder, I don't remember when we were talking about this, I wonder, we struck out without compromising existing character of the city or disturbing existing neighborhoods. Do we want to add that back at the end of this? Modify existing underutilized mixed use zones, including the city center, commercial and downtown areas to allow for additional higher density residential without compromising existing character of the city, blah, blah, blah.
Is there a pro or
Yeah.
con to adding that language back in?
Yeah, I don't know why we would have struck that out because,
Yeah.
Because I remember talking about it, but I don't remember striking it out.
yeah,
And I apologize, my history on this is a little bit short, but I took the document that was in the packet from last week. What was stricken, I just wrote it into here as it was presented.
mhm.
So if there's something here we want to make sure is added back in, now is the time to do it.
So what do you think is a,
It feels
Commission.
like we can still keep that first bullet point in and then the modification of the second bullet point and still meet the intent of the goal. That's
Yeah.
kind of what I would think, but
That's
Nan,
what
is that what you're driving towards as
that's
well?
what I'm thinking, yeah. So if we just add at the very end, without compromising existing character of the city or disturbing existing neighborhoods. Would that work, Scott? So we have the new words modifying existing underutilized mixed-use zones, including the city center, commercial and downtown zones, to allow for additional higher density residential. Then comma, without compromising existing character of the city or disturbing existing neighborhoods. Does that make sense? Does that work? Do you like that?
It does. I've actually copied and pasted it here below.
Oh,
So
okay,
making
great.
edits in real time. So if I felt like that sentence flowed well and made sense, but I basically just took where it was up here
Yeah,
and just copy pasted it below.
okay.
I like that.
Mhm.
Everybody okay with that? Okay.
I like that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on this second goal and its strategies and timeline? Okay, we'll move on to goal 3. Okay, so the third goal, create or allow for and reduce regulations related to internal or detached accessory dwelling units in residential zones. Here we're saying internal or detached. The state, as you know, recently pushed the issue on accessory dwelling units or ADUs to where we have to allow them at least internally in existing residences, in existing residential zones. But detached is also an option. Detached is where you have like a little casita or a cabin in your backyard, or maybe a detached garage with an apartment above. So the state language is a little bit more specific as to internal and detached instead of leaving it ambiguous. So we added that language in to be consistent. And in the strategies, we've stricken some language and left review and potentially modify the process and regulations for detached accessory dwelling units to help more people utilize detached units on their property. So we allow for accessory dwelling units, both internal and detached. Right now, a detached accessory dwelling unit requires a conditional use permit. So those types of units have to come before you for approval. But this strategy is to perhaps loosen or find ways to facilitate those units to be built in existing residential areas. From a timeline perspective, we've written that we would review the number of detached accessory dwelling unit permits issued with the Planning Commission and City Council in the first quarter workshop of 2023. And then we'll evaluate the requirements and process, including size limitations, setbacks, et cetera, and modify to make the process accessible to a wider range of North Logan residents. I believe that this is supposed to be another bullet point, and that might be part of that formatting that changed when I saved it into Google Drive from Word. So let's just add a bullet point there. You guys have any questions on this goal, strategy, timeline?
This is probably just really nitpicky but wordsmithing, but under the goal 3, create or allow for and reduce regulations. I'm wondering if maybe I'm struggling with reduce. That's kind of indicating a mandate. If create or allow for and modify regulations, does that
So we
make any difference? Soften it up or?
we can wordsmith, but then it will not follow that state language precisely as it's written. I don't know that, and I haven't heard that that is an issue per se. I know we're trying to bring this into alignment with the state. When we go to report to the state our goals and strategies, I'd be a little bit apprehensive of them reading our strategy and saying, hey, that strategy doesn't match one of those 23 menu items. But I haven't heard if that's an issue. If you want to play around with the language, that would be, I guess, a concern I would have.
I would vote to just play it safe and keep it aligned with the state language, even though
Okay.
I agree that it's a little bit cumbersome just to avoid conflict with that
Right.
down the road.
If we had 4 goals and we knew for sure 3 of the 4 were verbatim, yeah, maybe that wouldn't be an issue because we'd still be meeting that minimum requirement. But we're at 3.
So it's better to keep it.
So we're going to be responsible to modify or reduce, I should say.
Yeah.
Create or allow for and reduce.
I think they're trying to hit multiple birds with one stone here. So for communities that may not yet have an ADU ordinance, they're saying, hey, create that regulation or allow for those ADUs to be built in your area. Or if you already have one, then maybe look to reduce those regulations. I think it's trying to add multiple things here in one goal. So it's trying to address multiple communities that may not yet have an ordinance in place. We do. So we don't need to create or allow for it anymore. But what this goal now is saying is if you already have that in place, then maybe you need to look at reducing those regulations.
So I wonder if what Dwight's getting to is, are we only required to look at reducing the regulations, or are we required to actually reduce the regulations?
The way that I read it is
You're required.
reduce. Because I think if the language said look into or evaluate, reduction of regulations, I think what it's saying here is find a way to reduce any roadblocks that you may identify. So for example, we have an accessory dwelling unit, or sorry, a detached accessory dwelling unit can only be permitted with a conditional use permit, and the internal ones in the basement, for example, does not have to have a conditional use permit. Maybe we look into saying maybe we don't need a conditional use permit on a detached or something to that effect. Right now, that's pretty wide open. An accessory dwelling unit is not hard to achieve, even with a conditional use permit. But we could look at eliminating or reducing impact fees. So somebody who's pulling a building permit for an accessory dwelling unit has less upfront cost to actually putting one in. But we could look at other goals and strategies, but we'll have to look at maybe what those could be.
Scott, question on that. You say we have an ordinance for setback. We're also looking at it, including in the ordinance, space for the side yard and the rear.
That's already in our code. So
Okay.
any building built on a lot has to meet the existing setbacks for an ADU. So an ADU right now has to meet the same setbacks as a primary residence.
Okay.
And that's already in the language. Okay. Any other questions on this goal?
Okay, commission, what do you think about? Are you okay with reduce? Do you want to get rid of it?
I guess the only potential concern that I would have with that is if we review the regulations and determine that we're already kind of at the bare minimum that we would like, but the goal says that we're required to reduce and we can't find anywhere to reduce, maybe that puts us in a little bit of a pinch. But like you say, I guess,
I think there's ways we can find a way.
Okay.
Right now, we're saying that they're limited in square footage. We could even add a couple of square feet to that limitation. We could find ways to say that we're less
okay,
restrictive.
slightly
what I
reduce
read.
impact fees.
Mhm.
I recall that in our conversation previously, talking about just adding some square footage
Yeah.
or something that seemed minimal, but it
Right.
meets that.
Again, this kind of gets down to what's the intent of this legislation from the state. You know, I think they're going to want to have us do, something that is meaningful, but so far the language isn't that pointed, but it may get to that point.
Okay, so we're okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, my other question, let's go back to strategy number 2. We talked about striking out near major transit investment corridors. Want to strike it out, leave it? Our major transit investment corridors in North Logan are not much.
Oh, yeah. So,
Bus
yeah,
stops.
this, I guess, goes back to just
Confuse us.
verbatim duplicating the state's language to avoid any confusion there.
Yeah, I
Okay.
don't think that there's any harm in leaving it here. We don't even
Okay.
have any transit corridors that are defined as such, from my understanding.
Okay. So we're
I
good
think
with
we
that?
just keep it if
I
it
just-
meets the.
For me, I'd like to see, look to the future and we may need one.
we
So
may-
let's just keep it.
No, we
Okay.
may.
Great, sounds good.
Oh, can I ask a question too?
Yes.
Do we know when that well's coming online and its possible production? So this is the only well we're drilling right now or proposed to drill? Okay,
So we say early 2023 after the new city well has been completed, but Alan, that sounds like that's more mid 2023 by the time we actually can evaluate the production coming out of that well. Yeah,
Does that
I-
language matter early or just saying 2023? Is
yeah,
that what
maybe
you're
it does.
getting at?
Yeah,
Or
I
just
guess if we
saying-
need to change the language from early 2023, maybe just
You
Leave
could
early
just say
out.
2023.
2023. Yeah,
Mhm.
I would
like you said, I don't know.
like to strike that out too. That's good.
Okay,
This is on goal 2, correct?
on goal. yeah.
Yes.
Timeline.
No, goal 1.
Oh,
And we're on
guess
goal
we're
2,
looking
the
at
goal
timeline.
two's
is where
timeline.
we're
Oh,
at.
I
Yeah,
was
right
reading
there.
right. Oh, I'm reading the wrong thing.
So yeah, goal 1, we're talking about getting
Yeah.
together and having some discussions with city council.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay,
So goal 2, evaluate city infrastructure and water supply in 2023.
Okay.
Cross out early.
Put the end back in there.
Yes. By the end of 2023.
Even better.
oh, sorry, let's just, do you guys have a preference?
in 2023 it leaves the whole year available.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. All right. Scott, are we ready to go on with public hearing?
Yep, so you'll just need to open a public hearing and close a public hearing on this.
Okay. Let me read you the instructions for public hearing. Before you begin, if anyone has a comment, please state your name for the record. Please speak into the microphone so that your comments can be recorded. Please limit your statements to 2 minutes. If you are also speaking on behalf of others, you may ask the chairman for more time. Please phrase your opinions in the form of statements, not questions. A public hearing is your opportunity to express your opinions to the planning commission. It is not a time to ask questions and expect dialogue between yourself and the commission or city staff. Please address your comments to the commission, not the public. The commission might ask questions about your comments in order for them to better understand you. If you have questions or need to discuss an issue, please meet with the planning commission members or the appropriate city staff member before the public hearing where dialogue can take place. You may provide a written statement as your input for a hearing. You may read your entire statement or summarize it. The 2-minute limit applies. You may provide a copy of a written statement to the city recorder. He will make copies for the commission. Written comments, if a copy is provided, become a part of the public record, but are not included in the minutes of the meeting. All right. We will open this public hearing. If anybody in the public has a statement to make,
Do we need to have a motion to open the public?
do we
hearing?
need a motion to open it? No?
Okay.
And we don't need a motion to close it? All right. Okay. I don't think we have any comments to make. So we will close our public hearing. And do we need to vote on sending this to the city council?
You will need to make a formal recommendation through a
Okay.
motion. Yep.
All right, so we need to make a formal recommendation.
I move that we, oh, sorry, Nate.
Go ahead, go
I
ahead.
move that we recommend to, or that, that we send this recommendation forward to the city council to adopt this moderate income housing plan
As proposed.
as proposed.
With the
Yeah,
changes
with the
made.
changes proposed.
Okay, anybody
I
second?
second that. Heron
Okay.
second.
Kenny moved and Heron second that we recommend this with the changes made to the city council. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, good job. Thank you, Scott. Oh, any opposed? No, okay, thank you. Let's move on to item number 2. Consideration and potential recommendation regarding the preliminary plan and development plan associated with the Ward Commercial Subdivision. Scott, you want to tell us about this?
Yeah, so you may remember this from a couple months back. This came before you for a concept plan recommendation, which received a positive recommendation to city council. City council, I believe it was in March or April, also approved their concept plan. So the next step for this particular subdivision is that it go through a preliminary plat and a development plan review and a recommendation from the planning commission. A little bit of history. This actually came through 7 years or so ago. And the developer, I don't believe, recorded the plat. So it was a formal process to get that recorded as a subdivision plat. It doesn't sound like that had happened. So we're going through that formal process now, making sure this gets recorded with the county recorder's office, and that these lots, the 5 that are proposed, are recorded lots on the subdivision. So what you have in front of you, I provided you guys with the staff memo, goes through a little bit of analysis, and then also printed out this plat document for you. What you'll see on the plat, 5-lot subdivision, there's an existing building there that is proposed to be split into 2 lots. So lots 1 and 2, and then we'll have 3 additional lots as well. Right now, there's access on the north side as well as on the south side. There's an access easement on the top side, the north there, 30 feet in width. But there's also an existing curb cut on the south side as well. Going through this memo, I'm not sure what you guys are familiar with, so I'm just going to do it how I'm familiar. Let me know if there's something that you'd like to discuss. But typically, when we look at these, we look at the general plan, just make sure that anything that's proposed is in alignment with the general plan. And we pull this open so you can see what I'm looking at here. Popping down. So the general plan, this is the future land use map in the general plan. The star marks the spot there. It's kind of little, but right at the top of the cursor is where this is located, about 2300 north. And the pink color shown on this future land use map is commercial. So the proposal is to create 5 commercial lots to be built to each individual lot's specification, however that owner or future owner wants to build those lots.
Hey, Scott, this is the one where I think it's Carpets of America that's in that building right now. Am I recalling correctly?
Was.
Okay.
Yep, that's right.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. Whenever we're looking at a subdivision, when we have a land use application into the city, it's kind of an open door for the city to look at housekeeping items, such as right-of-way dedication, making sure that any trails that are shown in our trails master plans are dedicated at that time, where we can, what we call exact these types of elements from the property owner. So looking at the transportation master plan and the trails plan we'll look at here in a second, you'll see, given the location, there are no planned roads that traverse this area. So there will be no road dedication shown on the plat. There's no more right of way that is being asked for. Looking at the trails and parks plan, same story here. You can kind of see it's a little bit small, but the purple lines are showing some of these proposed trail connections. Again, we don't show a trail connection traversing this property, so we're not asking for any trails with this development. Okay. As I looked back through the history on this, just trying to get up to speed, back during the concept plan review process, there were a couple of reports that were waived, a couple that we have not yet received, but a soils report was not determined to be necessary, so that was waived. A drainage plan is something that we do still need to see. For the subdivision as a whole, the plat does indicate, there is a note on the plat that indicates that each lot will need to retain and detain their water on site on that individual lot when it is built. But as a subdivision as a whole, typically we look to see that there's a drainage plan and we know where that water is draining to. So when you look at the staff recommendation, we will ask for a drainage plan, or we are recommending that we do get a drainage plan. Water conservation plan is also something we typically ask for. That's something that we'll ask or recommend to be submitted. The geology report was waived. There are no anticipated geologic hazards on this flat area. And then an open and common space plan is not required given the nature of a commercial subdivision. There's no bonus density. There's no open space that is being dedicated. So that was waived. So in the recommendation, there are a few things we want to see. Like I'd mentioned, we do want to see a drainage plan. We do want to see a water conservation plan, and both of those we'll want to see before it goes before the city council. We'll also need to have a development agreement. A private utility agreement will need to be executed between the city and the developer. There are some utilities that are located in the right of way on the north side of the property. And those utilities are technically not owned by the city. We will be providing the services, but the utilities themselves will need to be maintained by the property owner. And then lastly, this property does have frontage on Main Street. So lot 1, as you'll see on the west side, does have frontage on Main Street. As you'll recall, we do have a Main Street standard, a frontage standard on Main Street with sidewalk and a little bit of landscaping that we'll want to see a plan for that. And we'll want to make sure that those improvements are installed before any additional building permits are submitted and approved. So it'll be at the developer's discretion when they want to do that, but we just need to bring that frontage up to that standard before any additional development occurs on the property. Okay. So those are the recommendations from staff. We do find that as proposed, there's no, as proposed, per our recommendations, there will not, under the circumstances of this particular case and with the required conditions of approval in the code, be detrimental to the health, safety, or general welfare of persons residing or working in the vicinity. And the proposed subdivision complies with the regulations and conditions specified in the North Logan City Development Code. You guys have any questions on the proposal, what we're asking for as conditions, or the recommendation or findings?
Scott, remind me, with the plat, the building straddles lot 1 and lot 2. I guess that no problem there.
Yeah, and in the commercial zones, there's a 0 setback requirement. Now it is in the developer's interest to make sure that if there's any ownership on this, it remains consistent, or that building is condominiumized so they can sell the inside and the of one side and the other side to different entities, or they can retain ownership and lease either side. But yeah, it is unique where there is a 0 lot line setback.
We have a comment you can make.
I'm gonna say there is a fire rated cinder block wall.
Okay.
And that's what I was going to ask. There's 2 sections of that building, isn't there?
Yeah, and it's a cinder block fire rated wall that separates the. front
Yeah.
and the back.
Thanks, Jason.
So it's kind of like a townhome situation where you own the dirt underneath you, but your walls touch together in the middle. So your lot line is that adjoining line between the 2 units. That's kind of the idea.
A question on this drainage. Is there a possibility of getting a drainage pond there in front like we've seen in some of the other
I don't know if
developments?
the applicant can speak to that.
So there is an existing one. It's been there for 30 years. There is kind of a depression. There is a drainage ditch that goes all the way down the parking lot, where the parking lot slopes to a concrete trough kind of. And then there is kind of there is an existing depression in front grass area with a gate valve.
Yeah.
So there is some existing drainage going in.
Yeah, and as we're asking for this drainage plan, that may be shown on the plan. We'll want to make sure there's enough capacity in there, and they may
Right.
need to do some improvements. We're not sure what that capacity is. It may serve to satisfy that, or if it's not adequate as far as capacity is concerned, we may need to add a little bit more capacity, but the plan will show us what that would require.
Basically, the first 2 lots that were already developed at the time, standards probably changed.
Yeah. So the applicant's speaking about this area
Right.
here on the Main Street frontage. This is the same area that will need to be improved to that Main Street standard that we're talking about. So there may be some opportunity to hit 2 birds with 1 stone with that.
And then that structure on lot 3, is that a permanent structure?
It's an existing building.
Okay.
We put some money into it. I mean, it just depends. Right now, we want to build an addition right there. Either, I'm talking to the architects, there's pros and cons. You want me to go there?
Hey, Jason,
We're working on trying to, we need some more warehouse space.
Can you say your name?
Jason Ward. So we would love to add on an addition, like these are 100 by 100, 100 by 100, do another about 100 by 100. Whether we've got fire sprinklers, the building's got all those things, it's already got power, already got utilities. It may make sense to actually attach to that or not. There's kind of some pros and cons. So we're kind of working through what would be the highest best use, and then to update the building. I think it was built in the 70s.
that building on the east, was that formerly a garage?
It's been a mechanic shop I've been there for 25 years, and it's always operated as that. So.
Yeah,
But that's not necessarily my long-term goal. No.
Yeah.
We'd probably incorporate it into our building, and it won't probably have a change of tenant sooner than later. Got to work it all out so that everybody's happy. But yeah, so our goal is to get going on an addition right there as soon as possible. Right now, it's all one big loan. And so by subdividing it, it's easier to do like $2 million projects in phases, maybe 5 phases versus, to get a $10 million loan, it's bigger than others. So we can do it one step at a time. That's our goal.
Thanks.
So I guess we could conditionally recommend that the city council, that this go to the city council for approval, but with the conditions being the drainage plan, the water conservation plan.
Yeah, with all of these recommendations that they
Okay.
have.
Yep. And those items would be reviewed by staff, obviously, prior to going to city council.
Mhm. Any other questions?
And have you had any conversation with the applicant with regard to these points?
that is the applicant.
Unfortunately, no, and I have to apologize for that just due to the transition between Spencer and myself. So the applicant has been very accommodating and patient with us as we've transitioned. So I apologize and thank him for that. But yeah, we will have better communication going forward for sure.
Any other questions? Comments? So what we need to do is we need to have a motion to potentially recommend this.
Yeah.
Including the staff recommendations.
Yeah, and
Right.
you would also want to make sure to mention the findings in your motion. You can add additional findings of your own, but the findings in the staff report can also suffice. So the motion can say subject to the recommendations and findings in the staff report if you'd like to formulate your motion that way.
All right, are you ready to make a recommendation, a motion? I need somebody to do that then.
I move we make a positive recommendation regarding the preliminary plat and development plan associated with the Ward Commercial Subdivision consisting of 5 lots, approximately 2300 North Main Street, with the consideration or to include the recommendations and findings of the staff.
Is that good?
I second it.
You have a second?
Heather
Heather?
did.
Heather.
Yeah.
All right.
I was just quiet.
Dwight has moved and Heather second that we approve what are we doing? Recommend a potential recommendation. Okay. Exactly.
And findings.
And the findings.
And findings.
And the
Present findings or future findings.
Staff recommendations and future findings.
Yeah.
Findings, just findings
Just findings, recommendations and findings.
and
Staff.
findings. All right. All in favor?
Thank you.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, I think we got that worded out and sent on.
Thank you,
All right,
guys.
thanks, Scott. All right, let's go down to any staff business and discussion we have.
I don't have any other business for you guys other than just a reminder, we do have the league annual convention, Utah League of City and Towns annual convention coming up next month, October, the first week in October. I think it's like the 8th and 9th, something around there. You guys are welcome to attend, but we do need to know so we can get you registered in time. So that's down at the Salt Palace, Friday or Thursday, Friday. There's also a Saturday, but it's mostly just meetings for different committees and such and so on. So the educational components of it are Thursday, Friday.
Scott, is that an annual event?
It is. So they typically have an annual convention. That's what this is. They also have some events throughout the year, but they're much smaller in scale.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So I would like to go, but I can't free myself from work on those 2 days this year.
Yeah. One other thing to mention, and this may or may not have come through in Marie's email. We did have some email issues this week, and so we may or may not have received emails the last couple of days. So we apologize if you haven't received a response or if the agenda was short in its time coming to you guys. But I think we got that resolved this afternoon. I got a whole bunch of emails that came through all at once. So just FYI, in case you were curious.
Thank you.
Yep.
And thank you for this. This is nice to have. So,
I was privileged to go last year, and I would highly recommend anyone who might be interested and could work that into their schedule to attend. It was very informative. And
and you need to know by when, Scott?
Yeah, give us a deadline.
As soon as possible. There's a late period, and I'll have to dig up that email to see when that late period was, but it costs us more to register the later on we go. the closer to the meeting we go. So if you know, let us know. Sooner than later is better, so we can save a couple bucks.
Okay.
That was way off. Sorry.
All right. Any planning commission business? I don't think we have any other business. Next meeting would be September 20. I don't have my calendar.
September 22nd.
September 22nd.
Yeah.
October. Yeah, Marie brings up a good point. Sorry, real
Oh, there we
quick.
go.
So because staff will be, most of the office will be, and I think city council members will be there as well. Yep, fifth and sixth, right, Alan?
Yes.
Okay, so our first planning commission would have been on the 6th of October. So with our absence, we propose that we either cancel this meeting. Our next one would be on the 20th. I don't know that there would be a better time to postpone and reschedule for. I don't have a list of projects that are pending to get on that agenda as of right now, so.
Okay, and we don't have anything at the end of September.
We d-
22nd.
Yes, that's okay. We
Yep.
moved on. So we were on the 22nd and then we were talking about this. So we're on September 22nd and then October
That'd be the 20th.
be the 20th.
Yep.
Okay,
Nan, September 22nd, I'm going to be on travel for work. So hopefully we'll be able to cover that otherwise.
Have a quorum.
Yeah.
Yep. So far, I don't have anything that I know for sure will be on that agenda. So we'll see how that goes. If we don't have anything, we may end up canceling that as well. But we may throw some stuff on there just to discuss.
okay. All right. If that's it, then we need a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. Let's adjourn. Thank you. Oh, all in favor of moving, of going?
Hi.